The left's sense of entitlement has reached a tipping point, and there is no better example of this than the mayor down in New Orleans, who somehow thinks she can justify her first-class trip, summer trip to France on American taxpayer dollars, all in the name of her wokeness. You're not going to believe what she's saying. We're going to get into that. Plus, we're going to talk about the left's reaction to the passing of Queen Elizabeth. As the world mourns Queen Elizabeth, you've got folks on the extreme left celebrating her death, even actually hoping that it would have been painful for her. I mean, this is really kind of wacko, sicko stuff, but we need to discuss it. Hello, welcome to the program, everyone. Good to have you back. I am Trish Regan. Portions of today's show are brought to you by Legacy Precious Metals. There's never been a better time to invest in precious metals than now. So go to legacypminvestments.com for more. Legacy PM Investments, or call 1-866-589-0560. All right, let's start here in New Orleans. The Democrat mayor in New Orleans is refusing, saying she's not going to reimburse the city the $29,000 and change dollars that she spent upgrading her flights to first or business class because it's all for her safety. Apparently, as a Black woman, she can't fly coach because that would not be safe. I kid you not. This is actually what she said, which is why I say we're at that tipping point, right, of entitlement. But let me back up. So her name is LaToya Cantrell, and she's the mayor there in New Orleans. And she told reporters last week she's not going to pay it back. She's not paying. It's like a lot of money, right? There was some $18,000 first class trip to France over the summer, which was just for some sort of ceremony to sign some renewment of an agreement that they had with some little seaside town. Nice place to go right in the summer, especially when you can book an $18,000 ticket on taxpayers' dime. Anyway, she's not paying it back, and she's telling the local media this, according to the New Orleans Advocate and Times paper down there. I'm going to quote now from WWL, one of the stations: "All expenses incurred doing business on behalf of the city of New Orleans will not be reimbursed to the city of New Orleans." That may be seen as kind of a problem, especially given that the city of New Orleans actually has a policy for this. Employees are required to purchase, I'm going to quote here, the lowest airfare available. This is according to the policy, which WWL dug up. Employees who choose an upgrade from coach, economy, or business class flights are solely responsible, the policy says, for the difference in cost. Any reconciliation of travel expenses that result in overpayment by the city would require that the employee reimburse the city within 20 business days. But she can't do it because, she's a mom and she's Black. And those two things apparently, I'll let her words speak for herself. I quote, "As the mother of a young child whom I live for, I am going to protect myself by any reasonable means in order to ensure I am there to see her grow into the strong woman I am raising her to be. Anyone who wants to question how I protect myself just doesn't understand the world Black women walk in." So does it make you any safer on a plane? I mean, if the plane actually has some horrific malfunction, right? Like, I don't know if it matters whether you're in first or whether you're in coach. I don't know what she's trying to insinuate there about the people that would be flying from New Orleans to France in coach. Kind of seems a little Marie Antoinette class-like, does it not? I mean, she can't possibly sit in coach because it would affect her safety. I mean, this is the reason, if you would, why people are so fed up with the insanity of this movement, because they're just, when push comes to shove, saying, well, it's because I'm this or I'm that. And it's a use of the minority card, or as they'd say, the race card, in a way that is not becoming. And so it's thus no surprise that 55.4% of the registered voters that were just surveyed in a new poll support recalling Mayor LaToya Cantrell, right? Because it's not really cool when your leaders decide to use your money to go on a fancy vacation to France in the summer. Anyway, I want to get to some of the outrage that we've been seeing from the left and how they're doubling down on it in reaction to the Queen of England's death. Before we do that, you hear about situations like New Orleans and you say, wow, our leaders really, really don't get it. And whether it's happening on the local level with that mayor, or whether it's happening on a national level where you feel like they're just not putting us Americans first, I think that a lot of people feel this way. And this is, by the way, not party specific. It feels like these leaders just don't give a damn. But you know what? We have ourselves to blame. Voters have no one to look at but themselves. It's one of the reasons why I think it's so important that we take these issues seriously. And one organization that certainly does and that you can join forces with is AMAC. That's the Association for Mature American Citizens. And they are out there every single day all around the country championing and pushing forward policies that will benefit everyday Americans, looking out for this kind of waste that's going on. Take a look at AMAC. It's kind of like AARP. That's how I like to describe it. Just AARP, but with your values that I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you and I probably hold very, very dearly. So go to amac.us/Regan, Regan, amac.us/Regan, and you can sign up or renew today. I really do encourage you to do it. It's just $16 a year and you're going to make all the money back. It's all kinds of giveaways and freebies and travel discounts and all that good stuff. But most importantly, you're joining forces with people that think like you and are worried about our country and our future. So amac.us/Regan today. All right, now we got to get to this horrible stuff. Queen of England just died. She was an elderly woman. I'll tell you, I got chills when I saw the photo of her with the new prime minister, who, by the way, I think is going to be fantastic for the UK. A lot of really strong economic chops and believes in low taxes and has almost a kind of libertarian conservative view of things. Plus, she's not fully libertarian because I think she's more hawkish than that. So I think she could be the next Margaret Thatcher, which is exactly what the country needs. But the Queen, who was just days away from her death, got herself up out of bed, got the makeup on, the whole outfit, and did what she needed to do for the sake of her country. I mean, talking about patriotism, for the sake of her country, perhaps in the sake of her family and the monarchy. So she was committed. Of course, everyone likes to pile on and hate the Queen and hate England and hate America. And that's just the world in which we live. But it's disturbing and upsetting when you see so many people that have benefited, right, from the economic opportunities that they've gotten here in America out there slamming the culture that has afforded them this. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm in no way condoning what England did do. And a lot of people see England as responsible for the slave trade. I would point out that the slave trade was actually happening thousands of years before, and really almost since the beginning of civilization, unfortunately. And I'm talking civilization, I mean, not during the gathering and hunting days, but once we had civilization, that was an unfortunate reality, and it did exist in Africa in a pretty sophisticated way long before England ever showed up, which was, I believe, in the 1600s. Maybe it was a little bit earlier than that. Let me check my notes because I've got a little research on this for you that I would like to share. I believe it was sometime around 1663. You see, I was close. I was 1600s. Anyway, it was done with royal approval, of course. So the crown was behind this, and they engaged in it for about 150 years, and you had a slave trade that was born. So I'm not saying that any of that is not absolutely horrible, but I do think it's important to look at things through today's lens. And had it not been for England, for example, and America, I mean, we might all be speaking German in all seriousness. I mean, you can't lose sight of the good stuff just because some bad stuff happened back in 1663. I should point out, as I mentioned, that there was a lot of slavery, unfortunately, in Africa far earlier than that. Do you know that Ethiopia still had millions of people that were enslaved as late as the 1930s? In fact, they didn't fully abolish it and make it illegal until 1942. And in northern Nigeria, in that case, you again had millions of people that were living there reportedly in this slavery up until 1936. None of it's good, but does it justify some of these tweets, including one, I think this is perhaps the most newsworthy, that came out of a professor at Carnegie Mellon University. Uja Anya wrote that she hoped the 96-year-old monarch would experience excruciating pain as she died. In fact, the tweet was, "I heard the chief monarch of a thieving, raping, genocidal empire is finally dying. May her pain be excruciating." And that's kind of sick, right? I mean, really sick. She later added, "If anyone expects me to express anything but disdain for the monarch who supervised a government that sponsored the genocide that massacred and displaced half my family, and the consequences of which those alive today are still trying to overcome, you can keep wishing upon a star." The time and place here, the woman's dying, she's on her deathbed, and you're going to wish her a painful death? You're going to have no compassion for an elderly woman? And you're going to assume, just going to assume that the world would have been a better place without England. You have the University of Michigan professor out posting that telling the colonized how they should feel about their colonizers' health and wellness is like telling my people that we ought to worship the Confederacy. Respect the dead, this woman wrote, Ebony Elizabeth Thomas, when we're all writing these tweets in English. How'd that happen? We just chose this language? I could say a lot here, because the truth is, you don't know. You absolutely don't know. I mean, you might not have had your lineage at all. You're making a lot of assumptions there. Granted, what has happened in the past was awful. Yes, awful. But at some point, this is the world today, and we want to ensure that everybody keeps moving forward, keeps getting opportunities. And in order to do that, we don't need mayors like the one in New Orleans that are taking everything from the people. We don't need school systems like what we have in Baltimore. Larry Elder was on the show on Friday. He pointed this out very eloquently. He's out with a new movie, Uncle Tom, uncletom.com if you want to check it out. Anyway, Larry pointed out that the schools in Baltimore are so bad that 13 of the Baltimore high schools graduated students with 0% proficiency in math. And by the way, that was back in 2017. Guess what it is today? I mean, I don't even want to know. Think of how far our kids have fallen behind because of those school closures that went on and on and on. And you had places like Baltimore and the worst parts of LA that were some of the last to open in terms of the school systems, because you had the teachers' unions in bed with all these lawmakers. I mean, this is what is absolutely wrong. We owe it. We owe it to every single American to provide them with more opportunity. You can't guarantee the outcome, okay? You can't do that. That's what these people want to do. They want to guarantee outcome. You can't do it, but you can hopefully guarantee some opportunity. It's not perfect, right? You don't know what the family situation's like, but at least when it comes to school, for goodness sakes, Baltimore, you can't be graduating with 0% proficiency in math. And then the rest of the schools were down in the single digits, proficiency in math. I mean, how the heck do they ever get passed along? I did a story on this actually years ago when I was at CBS News, and I looked at some of the New York City schools. They kept passing these kids along. You know why? Nobody wanted to have to deal with it. It wasn't fair for one teacher to get stuck with these kids, year after year after year. So instead of making sure that they knew what they needed to know, they just made it somebody else's problem. And that's why you have students that in some cases can't even read. Cannot read in New York today. You have students that aren't proficient in math today. So look, I don't know what the world would have been like if we had all adopted some of the African systems that were in place prior to the UK doing what it did. We don't know, right? But I think it was a pretty tough place. I think it's still a pretty tough place. You can blame whoever you want for that, but a lot of those challenges, they did exist. We cannot constantly judge the past through today's lens and move forward. That's what needs to happen in America today. I'm so glad you're listening to this show. We got a lot going on this week. Do not forget, We've got inflation data tomorrow. I suspect it's still going to continue to show inflation's pretty high. Even if it comes down a little bit, inflation is high. And we've got jobs numbers we got to look at on Thursday, weekly jobless claims. We've got the Fed, of course, meeting September 20th. We'll know on the 21st what their plan is with interest rates. I mean, I think they ought to move a full point, but we're looking at least a hike of 75 basis points. So what does that mean for the overall economy? I can tell you this, housing is struggling. We're going to do something on that later this week, actually, because a lot of people are worried that housing is in a severe enough recession to have a significant ripple effect on the rest of the economy. Great to have you here. I'll see you on my website, trishintel.com. Make sure you sign up for the newsletter so you never miss what we're covering. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast or to this channel if you're watching on video, Rumble and YouTube, and I'll see you tomorrow.